That's Brenda. This is me. This is us. This is our boat. And this is our camper. And our goal is to see the world. Actually, this was our camper. About a month and a half into our road trip, we decided it wasn't working out too well, so we traded up and got this guy. Now that's our camper. Anyway, we got rid of our junk, we quit our jobs, and left Seattle on May 31st, 2014. We began our trip by sailing north through the San Juan Islands, into Canada, and up the Inside Passage towards Alaska. We'd heard the Inside Passage was one of the most beautiful places on Earth, so we thought we should check it out. And what do you know, it was pretty spectacular. On this little trip, we caught as much fish as we could eat, we anchored in beautiful bays, and had surprisingly good weather that forced our captain to sail our little ship in her bikini. We saw tons of wildlife, and we hiked and explored like crazy. We swam in remote mountain lakes with no one around but us and the bears. We saw the world's tallest totem pole, quite possibly the world's smallest post office, the library with the shortest business hours, and had the best cup of coffee ever in Nanaimo. One of our favorite things to do up north was to explore inlets and bays on our paddleboards. But more than anything, we took about 12,000 selfies. The funny thing with all those selfies was that it didn't seem to matter how hard we tried, we just couldn't get any of those selfies to turn out. And oh yeah, we sailed a lot. In 3.5 months, we only made it halfway to Alaska. There was just too much to see and do on the way up there. The sailing season ended, so we put our boat in storage and hopped in our trusty camper. The second part of our trip was to focus on seeing as many national parks and natural wonders as we could manage. We started with hiking Hurricane Ridge in the Olympics, then spent a handful of days in the North Cascades, where we were joined by our good friends the Jessups. In Idaho and Montana, we explored old mining ghost towns and got swarmed by bats in the Lewis and Clark caverns before making it to Yellowstone. Even though Yellowstone was on both our bucket lists, we only spent 5 days there because we had to blast through the Tetons in Wyoming to get to Mesa Verde in Colorado before they closed access to the ruins for the winter. Made it with 1 day to spare and had a great time. Next up was Moab, Utah, where we hiked through Arches and Canyonlands National Parks and some of the surrounding areas. We then moved farther south to the Gooseneck State Park, which has what I consider to be the best camping spot in the world. It's right on the edge of a 1,000-foot cliff, and it's pretty amazing. Then it was the Grand Canyon, where we hiked a bunch and decided to bike the entire South Rim. In Nevada, we saw some more ghost towns, swung through Las Vegas to visit my dad, and hiked and climbed around Red Rocks. Went back to Arizona and saw some more ancient ruins. Oh, remember our camper? Well, that's where we decided to swap for a new one. Then, we went and rode some horses, checked out a bunch more ruins, and we hiked all throughout Sedona. We even spent a couple of afternoons just hanging out by a pool. Spent Thanksgiving at my brother's house in Mesa and hit the world land speed record in his Toyota Prius. We went rock climbing near Globe, Arizona, and we stopped in Tombstone for an old-timey gunfight. We hiked the Coronado National Forest and climbed one of Arizona's tallest peaks. Arizona had surprisingly interesting wildlife. Some of it was beautiful, some of it was creepy, some of it was majestic, and some of it stalked us and wanted to eat us. We made our way through Page, Arizona, and back into southern Utah to explore the Escalante National Monument. This is where we discovered our love of slot canyons. We spent a couple of weeks dropping into and exploring them by the dozens. Escalante had some of the most incredible geological features that we've seen anywhere. We spent a couple of weeks exploring, but unfortunately, we got driven away by some pretty severe thunderstorms. We spent a few days in Zion National Park and just happened to bump into our old friends Bob and Sherry in Bryce Canyon. We went through the Saguaro National Park and spent quite a few days hiking, climbing, and exploring in Joshua Tree. We found some more slot canyons near Palm Desert. We hiked through the San Andreas Fault, and we had one of my favorite snacks while we were there. Death Valley turned out to have some of the most dramatic scenery of any place we've been. Unfortunately, we were chased away by a huge sandstorm, so we drove north and got to Bend, Oregon just in time for a huge snowstorm. We decided to spend winter with skis strapped to our feet in the mountains. When we weren't skiing, we were rock climbing, hiking, and exploring. Brenda even ran some races and did surprisingly well, but mostly we just caught up and spent time with our good friends. Next, we went to Crater Lake with our skis, and we toured around the rim. We tried to sleep in our tent, but were harassed by a pack of coyotes in the middle of the night. So we explored Shasta Lake with our paddleboards. We soaked our toesies in Lake Tahoe, and then we hiked a little over 75 miles through Yosemite. There we found some of the best viewpoints on the face of the earth. In Sequoia National Park, we saw the largest tree in the world, and we almost got eaten by bears while we were there. We hugged some huge trees, and, well, we almost got eaten by more bears. We climbed some high peaks at Kings Canyon, and then we hiked the entire Pinnacles National Park in one day. After that, we decided we needed some R&R on the beaches of San Diego. From there, we moseyed up the coast, spent a few days in San Francisco, and we walked across the Golden Gate Bridge. Since we can't get enough big trees, we wandered around in the redwoods for a few days, and from there, we hiked miles of the Oregon Coast Trail. We had amazing beaches all to ourselves, and checked out a bunch of old lighthouses. When we made it back to Washington, we took a backpacking trip through a series of high peaks in the Cascade Mountains. After that, we hopped back on our boat for another summer of sailing the waters of the Northwest. There we were chased by pirates, and we spent quite a few nights admiring some of the best sunsets we've seen anywhere. The best thing about our summer is that we got to spend it exploring the islands with good friends. We caught a lot of fish, caught a lot of crab, and well, we ate like kings. There's nothing better than fresh seafood in the Northwest. Next, we hopped on a plane and flew to Vanuatu in the South Pacific to join our friends. While we were there, we did some tropical sailing, some island hopping and exploring. We roamed around through the jungles, and we visited some pristine beaches and remote island villages. A lot of time was spent in the water just snorkeling and diving. But after a few weeks exploring Vanuatu, it was time to set sail for Kiribati. We spent 8 days at sea, and in that time crossed the equator. We saw some amazing sunsets, and even some more amazing thunderstorms and squalls. Well, we finally made it to Kiribati safe and sound. Unfortunately, when we arrived, we found out we had a family emergency back home. We were only able to spend a few days exploring the country, but what a few days it was. Kiribati was an amazing place. We hopped on the first flight out, which took us to Majuro in the Marshall Islands. In Majuro, we found out they have huge bugs. They also have a depressing amount of plastic all over their beaches. We spent a few days in Majuro before finally making it back to Seattle to help out with our family emergency. Since medical emergencies involve a lot of waiting, we filled time with camping and fishing, and just having general old fun. Mostly, we just spent time with our good friends. Once we had a green light to leave, we went back down to Bend, Oregon just in time for another snowstorm. We decided to spend another winter with skis strapped to our feet in the mountains. Bend, Oregon is our kind of town. In the past 18 months, we've set foot in 6 countries. We've hiked just under 3,000 miles, climbed 28 peaks, visited 20 national parks, spent 8 months sailing the high seas, explored 92 islands, spent 10 months being trailer trash in our home on wheels, floated down 6 rivers, and we've seen more natural wonders than we can count. We've gotten up every day and felt pretty lucky to be able to do this. Even with doing all that stuff though, We just mostly took a lot of selfies. What do you know, most of them just never seem to turn out.